Your birth certificate is a static document, but your biological age is a moving target. In 2026, we no longer guess how fast we're aging, we measure it. I'm glad you're here, because what we're covering today is not speculation, not wellness influencer content, and certainly not a shortcut. Welcome to Iron Years. This is a structured breakdown of 3 clinical protocols that researchers are actively studying right now in 2026, all of which have demonstrated measurable effects on how quickly the human body ages at the cellular level. If you are between 50 and 75 years old and you are serious about the quality of your next decade, stay with me through this entire video. What you learn here will change how you think about your own biology. Let's establish what we're actually talking about when we say biological age. Think of it like a speedometer for cellular decline. The DunedinPACE clock is an epigenetic measurement tool developed out of rigorous longitudinal research. Unlike older biological aging clocks, DunedinPACE doesn't just tell you what your biological age is right now, it tells you the pace at which you are aging. And here is what matters most for you today. That speedometer can be adjusted. Clinical data from multiple independent research programs has now demonstrated that specific, repeatable lifestyle and nutritional protocols move that needle in the right direction. These are not biohacks. They are not experimental fringe protocols promoted by people selling supplements on Instagram. What we are presenting today represents emerging medical consensus findings that are being replicated, refined, and in several cases formalized into clinical guidelines. 3 protocols, each one targeting a different but interconnected biological mechanism. Each one supported by evidence-based research. Let's begin. Protocol 1. The Sarcopenia Switch. Muscle is the organ of longevity. I want you to sit with that phrase for a moment, because most people still think about muscle in purely cosmetic or functional terms. Can I carry my groceries? Can I climb the stairs? That framing is decades out of date. Modern research has repositioned skeletal muscle as a profoundly active endocrine organ, meaning it secretes chemicals that communicate with virtually every other system in your body. The specific chemicals we are referring to are called myokines. When you engage in resistance training, and this is key, we are specifically talking about resistance training, not casual walking. Your muscles produce and release myokines into circulation. One of the most studied of these is a molecule called irisin, which crosses the blood-brain barrier and has been linked to neuroprotection and improved cognitive function. Another is interleukin-6, which, in the context of exercise-generated production, very different from inflammation-generated production, actually has anti-inflammatory and metabolic regulatory effects. Here is the clinical concern for adults in the 50 to 75 age range. Sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass and muscle function, begins meaningfully around age 40, and accelerates significantly after 60. Longitudinal studies show that individuals with lower muscle mass in midlife have substantially elevated risks, not only for physical decline, but for metabolic disease, cognitive decline, and reduced immune resilience. The muscle loss is not just a cosmetic issue. It is a systemic biological crisis that unfolds slowly. The prescription here, based on clinical data, is progressive resistance training at minimum 2 days per week, with emphasis on compound movements that recruit large muscle groups. For adults in this age range, the protein intake required to support muscle protein synthesis is also substantially higher than previously recommended. Current evidence suggests approximately 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily is optimal, particularly when distributed across meals rather than consumed primarily at one sitting. This is the Sarcopenia Switch. Flip it on, and you change the entire downstream biology of how your body ages. Protocol 2. Metabolic Flexibility. Protocol 2 takes us into the cellular engine room. Blood sugar stability. And I mean true glycemic stability over the course of an entire day. Not just avoiding the obvious sugar spikes from dessert is now understood to be one of the most powerful levers we have for regulating cellular repair processes. Here's the mechanism that matters. When blood glucose spikes repeatedly, particularly in the postprandial window after meals, it triggers a cascade of downstream effects, including elevated insulin secretion, oxidative stress at the cellular level, and suppression of a critical repair pathway called autophagy. Autophagy is essentially the body's internal cellular cleanup system. It breaks down damaged proteins and dysfunctional organelles and recycles their components. Chronic glycemic instability disrupts this process. In 2026, one of the most significant areas of metabolic research involves what are called GLP-1 pathways. GLP-1, or glucagon-like peptide 1, is a naturally occurring hormone your body produces in response to food intake. It plays a central role in regulating insulin secretion, moderating appetite signaling, and this is what is genuinely exciting the research community right now. It appears to have direct effects on inflammation and potentially on the aging process at the cellular level. This is not a sales conversation about any particular medication. The research being conducted in 2026 is focused on how diet, meal timing, and specific dietary compounds can naturally upregulate your body's own GLP-1 response. Foods that support natural GLP-1 production and healthy glycemic response include high-fiber vegetables, legumes, fermented foods, and proteins consumed at the beginning of meals rather than the end. Time-restricted eating protocols, specifically a window of around 8 to 10 hours for food consumption, have also shown meaningful effects on glycemic stability in clinical settings. The key takeaway from Protocol 2 is this: every time your blood sugar spikes and crashes, your cells are paying a price. Stabilize the foundation, and you create the biological conditions for repair. Protocol 3. The Senolytic Breakthrough. This is the protocol that generates the most scientific excitement in longevity research right now, and for good reason. Let me introduce you to senescent cells, and I promise once you understand what they are and what they do, you will never think about your own health the same way again. As cells age and accumulate damage from radiation, from oxidative stress, from simple replication errors, they can reach a point where they are too damaged to function normally, but they also resist the body's normal programmed cell death signal, a process called apoptosis. These cells enter a state called cellular senescence. They stop dividing, but they refuse to clear out. And here is what makes them genuinely dangerous. Senescent cells don't just sit there quietly. They actively secrete a toxic cocktail of inflammatory signals, enzymes, and growth factors collectively referred to as the senescence-associated secretory phenotype, or SASP. This chronic inflammatory output damages neighboring healthy cells and degrades tissue function over time. Researchers have begun calling them zombie cells, damaged, unable to perform their function, unable to die, and spreading harm to everything around them. The accumulation of senescent cells has been linked in clinical research to accelerated biological aging, increased risk for multiple age-related diseases, and reduced regenerative capacity across multiple organ systems. The question that researchers have been urgently working to answer is this: can we selectively clear these cells? The class of compounds being studied for this purpose are called senolytics agents that selectively induce apoptosis, specifically in senescent cells, while leaving healthy cells intact. And the leading natural compound generating the most serious clinical attention in 2026 is Fisetin. Fisetin is a flavonoid found naturally in strawberries, apples, onions, and cucumbers. Preclinical research demonstrated compelling senolytic activity, and what is particularly significant in 2026, human clinical trials are now underway to evaluate its effects. Among the most noteworthy is the Revitalize trial being conducted at Newcastle University, which is specifically examining the impact of Fisetin protocols on biological aging markers in older adults. This is not a completed study with final conclusions, but it represents exactly the kind of rigorous clinical investigation that separates credible longevity science from supplement marketing. The conceptual model that best explains what senolytics may accomplish is this: clearing zombie cells is not simply removing damaged debris. It is rebooting the immune system's capacity to maintain tissue quality. When senescent cells accumulate, they create a chronic low-grade inflammatory environment that suppresses normal immune surveillance and repair. Remove them, and you potentially restore the biological conditions for genuine regenerative activity. Let's bring this together. 3 protocols. Muscle as an endocrine organ. Generating myokines that protect the brain and regulate metabolism. Blood sugar stability as the foundation for cellular repair and autophagy. And senolytic compounds targeting the senescent cells that drive systemic inflammation and accelerated biological aging. None of this is magic. None of this bypasses the fundamental reality of time. You cannot stop the calendar. But what clinical data in 2026 is increasingly confirming is that the pace at which your biology ages is genuinely, measurably, and meaningfully within your influence. The DunedinPACE speedometer is not fixed. The biological markers we track are not predetermined. You are not a passive observer of your own aging, not anymore. Here at Iron Years, we are spending the entire summer of 2026 going deep on each of these clinical protocols, the specific training parameters, the dietary structures, the emerging trial data as it becomes available. This is ongoing documentation of real science in real time. If you want to be part of that journey, subscribe to Iron Years and join our Vitality Waitlist for our full structured program launching this August. The link is in the description. We are building this community for adults who are serious about the evidence, serious about the next chapter, and serious about showing up for it fully. The calendar keeps moving. Your biological pace doesn't have to match it. We'll see you in the next one.